As retirement gets closer, a quiet kind of worry starts to settle in for a lot of people. It doesn't always show up as panic, and it doesn't always feel overwhelming at first. Sometimes it's just a simple thought that lingers in the background. Did I do enough? Not enough saved. Not enough invested. Not enough planning. And after spending years working, raising a family, paying bills, and doing everything you could, that question can carry a lot of weight. Because underneath it all, what you're really asking is something deeper. Am I going to be okay? Here's a truth that doesn't get said nearly enough, and it can completely change the way you look at retirement. Retirement isn't about how much you've saved. It's about whether your income can support your life. That's the real measure. It's not your net worth on paper. It's not how your 401k compares to someone else's. It's not whether you reached some arbitrary savings milestone.
What truly matters is simple. Is the money coming in enough to support the way you want to live? Once you understand that, something shifts. You stop comparing yourself to others. You stop feeling like you're behind. And you begin focusing on what actually gives you freedom. Let's start with the first big idea. If you take nothing else from this, remember this one thing. Your retirement income needs to be greater than your expenses. It sounds obvious, almost too simple. But that simplicity is where clarity lives. Think about it. If every month more money comes in than goes out, what does that create? Stability, security, peace of mind, and most importantly, freedom. But here's where many people get stuck. They look at their savings, or what they feel is a lack of savings, and they panic. I don't have a large 401k. I didn't max out my IRA. I'm nowhere near where I should be. And suddenly, it feels like failure. But that's not the full picture. Not even close. There's a piece of value that most people completely overlook. Let's say you have a pension. Every month, like clockwork, money arrives in your account. It doesn't react to market swings. It doesn't drop during a recession. It doesn't follow headlines. It's simply there. Steady, predictable, reliable. Now compare that to someone with a large investment portfolio. Maybe they've saved $1 million. That sounds impressive, and it is. But here's the reality. That money doesn't automatically become income unless they withdraw from it, and they have to do so carefully. Using a common guideline, that $1 million might generate about $40,000 per year. That's roughly $3,300 per month before taxes. Suddenly, that big number doesn't feel quite as large. Now consider someone else. They don't have a huge investment account, but they receive a pension of around $1,600 per month. On paper, it might look like they're behind. But in reality, that pension can be comparable to having roughly $500,000 saved, producing income at a similar level. Let that sink in, because this is where perception and reality often disconnect. You might feel like you're lacking, when in fact you've built something extremely valuable, and this is where confidence starts to grow. There's something incredibly reassuring about guaranteed income. It allows you to live your life without constantly watching the markets. It lets you spend without guilt. It creates a financial foundation you can rely on. And here's something that might surprise you. There are people with millions saved who would trade places with someone who has consistent, predictable income. Because uncertainty, especially in retirement, can be exhausting. Certainty brings peace. But there's an important catch. Before you get too comfortable, there's something we need to address. Not all income keeps up with reality. And that leads us to something that quietly reduces purchasing power over time. Inflation. Inflation doesn't feel dramatic year to year, but over time, it changes everything. Groceries get more expensive. Healthcare costs rise. Everyday living slowly becomes more costly. And if your income stays the same, your lifestyle doesn't. Some income sources adjust for inflation. Social Security, for example, includes cost of living adjustments, often called COLA. These increases are meant to help benefits keep up with rising costs. But here's the detail many people miss. They don't always match your personal cost increases. And pensions? Many of them don't adjust much, if at all. Some increase slightly. Some follow partial inflation measures. Others stay fixed forever. So what does that mean? It means the income that feels comfortable today might feel tight 10 or 15 years from now. And there's another important conversation we can't ignore. The future of Social Security. There have been ongoing discussions about its long-term sustainability. While it's unlikely to disappear entirely, changes are very possible. Those changes could include higher taxes, lower benefits, or smaller annual increases. And here's the key idea. Even small changes can have large long-term effects. A slight reduction in yearly growth might not seem significant now, but over decades, it adds up. And that's something you don't want to overlook. Let's go back to something we mentioned earlier. Your income needs to exceed your expenses. That's true, but with one important condition. It shouldn't just barely exceed them, because life isn't perfectly predictable. Expenses change, inflation shifts, unexpected costs happen, so instead of aiming for just enough, you want a cushion, a buffer, something that gives you breathing room. That's what turns survival into comfort. Now let's talk about where many people make a critical mistake. At some point, most people sit down and try to figure out their retirement numbers. They open a notebook, a spreadsheet, or just start thinking through it. How much do I spend each month? At first, the answer feels easy, maybe $3,000 or $4,000. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people underestimate their expenses, and not by a small amount. It's not because they're careless. It's because life is more complex than it appears. Think about everything that happened over the past year. Not just your regular bills, but everything. Unexpected medical visits, gifts, trips, helping family, fixing things that broke, subscriptions you forgot about. Those moments where you said, "It's fine, I'll just pay for it." All of it adds up, quietly, consistently, and often invisibly. When people estimate expenses, they leave those things out, not on purpose, but because they don't feel routine. But if they happen every year, they are part of your reality. Here's a simple but powerful exercise. Go back and review your last 12 to 24 months of actual spending. Not estimates, real numbers, month by month. When you do this, something shifts. You stop guessing and start seeing the truth. And sometimes that truth is uncomfortable. Maybe you thought you were living on $4,000 a month, but the real number is closer to $5,000. That gap matters. It's the difference between feeling secure and slowly falling behind. And this matters more than most people realize. Because everything we've discussed, income, pensions, Social Security, depends on one key comparison: income versus expenses. If your expense number is wrong, your entire plan is unstable. It's like building a house on a foundation you never tested. Eventually, something gives. There's also one category people almost always overlook. It doesn't have a clear label, but it's always there: miscellaneous spending. And ironically, it's often one of the largest categories. This includes irregular costs, insurance, property taxes, repairs, travel, medical surprises, helping family, celebrations. These aren't optional parts of life, they are life. So when you plan for retirement, don't ignore them, include them, because the goal isn't a perfect budget, it's a realistic life. Now let's take this one step further. Let's say you've done everything right. You've calculated your real expenses, and you determine you need $5,000 per month. Here's the next question. Is that before taxes or after? Because that distinction matters. If your income is taxable, and much of retirement income is, then you don't just need $5,000, you need more. Because a portion of what comes in goes right back out. If you don't plan for that, things may look fine on paper, but in reality, you're always catching up. So what does smart planning look like? It's not complicated, but it requires honesty. Use real numbers, account for inflation, include all spending categories, and build in a buffer. Because retirement isn't a one-time calculation. It's something you live every day. Now let's talk about something people often avoid. It's uncomfortable, but important. What happens financially when one spouse passes away? In many households, retirement income comes from multiple sources: 2 Social Security checks, a pension, savings or investments. Together it feels stable. But when one spouse is gone, that structure changes. Often, it shrinks. One Social Security benefit may disappear. The remaining one may be smaller than the combined amount. Pension income may adjust depending on how it's structured. So the income that once supported 2 people changes, and here's the assumption many people make. Expenses will go down too. Sometimes they do, but not always in the way people expect. Housing costs often stay the same. Utilities don't drop in half. Healthcare expenses may increase. And emotionally, the last thing anyone wants is financial stress during loss. So instead of assuming balance, ask better questions. What income remains? What expenses change? Would the surviving spouse feel secure? Planning for this isn't negative, it's protective. It's an act of care. Now let's bring everything together. Retirement isn't about chasing a number, it's about understanding your life, your habits, your needs, your priorities, and aligning your income to support that. Here's the truth many people need to hear. Not having a large savings account does not mean you're behind. Let that sink in. If you have Social Security, a pension, and income that supports your lifestyle, you have something powerful. Stability. And stability is something money alone doesn't guarantee. In fact, there are people with millions who don't feel secure because their income depends on markets, on timing, on decisions they're unsure about. So what do? They try to create what you already have: predictable income, reliable cash flow, certainty. They look into annuities, they search for stability. You may already have it. So instead of focusing on what's missing, recognize what's already there. Because that shift in perspective changes everything. Retirement isn't the end, it's the beginning of something new, a different pace, a new rhythm, a new way of living. And the goal isn't just to get through it, it's to enjoy it, to wake up without financial stress, to make decisions with confidence, to live without fear. So if you take one thing from this, let it be this: your income should exceed your expenses, but your confidence should exceed your fear. Because numbers matter, but how you feel about those numbers matters just as much.